right, the very first step to bucking without sucking is knowing your equipment. And above all else, it's learning how to sharpen. If you don't know what a sharp cutter head looks like, if you're still sharpening with guides of any sort, throw them away and learn how to use a file, because it really is all in the chain. If your chain is not sharp, you're either going to be constantly swapping out chains and taking them to the dealership, which is idiotic, or you're going to be pushing on your sole. So learn how to sharpen, and then we'll talk technique.
Don't tell me I don't know how to sharpen. All right, really quickly here, let's talk about safety in terms of where and where not to place your hand and how to hold the grip, because the internet has a lot of opinions about this, and some of them are just insane. For instance, a guy told me that I should never have my hand anywhere that's not behind this brake. And I said, so you mean I can't use the half wrap handle to fell a tree like this, or a full wrap on the other side? He said, no, you always have to have it behind the handbrake in case it kicks back. Kickback. If the front of the bar, the tip, which is what causes kickback, is exposed and your saw is pulling, it effectively can't kick back. This is why you'll see guys have one hand on the saw. It's not a great idea, but it can't kick back unless that tip hits something unexpectedly. If the nose of your saw is buried in the wood, absolutely you want a firm grip and you want your thumb wrapped around the handle. Now, that said, you will often see me and plenty of other guys, I've never even really noticed I do it, pushing on the saw like this with their thumb on the bar, because I'm not really holding it. I'm just sort of stabilizing it, and I'm maybe giving a little pressure with my thumb. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. Yes, is it always safer to grip the saw like this firmly? Sure. You will, if you run the saw long enough, have a kickback, and it will scare the shit out of you, and you will realize there are times when you want to have good control over the saw, and yet that kickback will always overpower you.
All right, so you know how to sharpen. Now you want to know how to tune, at least a little bit if it's not an M-tronic, so it's not so bogged down in the cut. After that, you want to know something about compression and tension, and there's better places to get that than here. If there's no compression and you can simply cut from the top, like I'm doing here, by all means do that. That is the easiest way to buck, and you're not going to get pinched. But chances are, sooner than later, you're going to run into a case in which that's not the case. And you're going to have to sever the log somehow in order to buck it up for firewood. And there are several ways to do that. Let's talk about those right now. So much of the time, you're going to be able to just cut through the compression wood and keep your saw in the kerf, tickle it on through, and the log will drop and you'll get your bar out. But many cases, as in this case, it's wise to just stop for a minute before your bar is pinched. Pop a wedge in to keep that kerf open so that you have more time to get your bar out of the kerf before it drops and pinches your bar. You're going to get pinched, but you don't need to get pinched all the time. If you're getting pinched all the time, then you're sucking when bucking. You see right here how it opens the kerf up. The bar's not stuck, but I don't want it to get stuck. And this is just the easiest way of doing it, in my opinion. Call it the farmer way, but pros do it too. All right, so this ash log here is a good example of what you might come across. It's suspended over the trail here, and I need to get it bucked into smaller sections so that I can buck it up for firewood. Using the clockwork method here, which is to cut the far side of the wood first, in this case the low side, which matters because if you can help it, you don't want to cut from the low side or buck from the low side, and you'll see why here in a minute. Cut all that far wood. I'll show you this in a little bit on a bigger log yet. And then bring this all around in a clockwork manner, and you're going to be able to finish from the high side in this case. And you'll see why that matters, because things roll downhill. So we'll watch this together. Once again, I'm just going to go ahead and pop a wedge in. You don't need it here. I could probably ream buck or just keep my saw moving in the kerf and it would be just fine. But watch what happens here. It's interesting. I'm on a muddy ground and the log breaks free. And if I was downhill, it might be a problem. All right, so once you have logs severed into rollable sections, if you're just cutting firewood, you just want to cut down from the top most of the way through, then roll the log over, and then back bar up to keep your chain out of the dirt. Because as soon as you put it in the dirt, you're going to be sharpening again. And if you don't know how to sharpen, well, fix that.
If I just cut down, it's going to compress a little more. So you can go ahead. But sometimes your bar will catch that kerf and flip up in there, so make sure you're holding on to the saw. If you're going underneath and you catch that kerf and it starts to pinch, your bar will jam on you, kick back. Don't be afraid to do this either. There's no air under there, and real soon this is going to pinch together. I need to sever this here into shorter sections so that I can roll the log for firewood. What I often do in a situation like this, outside of putting a wedge in it, in case you didn't have one or you don't feel like getting one, cut a pie piece out of this so that you can see that you're not into the dirt yet. I can see what I'm doing and I have more room to get my bar unpinched. See, I can see down inside there, so I know as soon as I get to the bark to just let it go, because the bark will crack and she'll let loose.
Right, so the wedge is the easiest way, and if you have no air under it, cut that kerf helps, but much of the time you're not going to piss around with that. And there are a few things I look for when I'm logging or cutting firewood, and here they are.
Right there. So you can see the different color in chips here. When I'm in the heartwood and I change to the sapwood, I see this light white. And then as soon as I see the dark of the bark, I know it's free and that the bark will break off of there. Sometimes you have to just, push it around a little bit, jostle it, but it'll come loose.
So much of this is just doing it enough time. Here I am clearing trails. I can back bar up in some instances and then cut down. You just gotta learn how to read the wood, so to speak. All right, here I am logging some maple for some boards. This is a standard scenario when you're logging. The butt's a bit rotten, so I'm getting rid of some of that. You're going to go ahead and cut the compression first and then come from the tension side. And in this case, I'm moving my bar slightly to the right or your left of the kerf so that it doesn't fall on my bar. All right, similar situation here. You're going to use that clockwork method, cut the far side of the wood as much as possible. What am I doing here? Oh, I'm showing you the thumb technique. Keep it wrapped if you want to stay safe. Cut as much of the compression as you can until you can't cut any more, and then come from the bottom. This is your standard technique. You're going to use this most of the time if there's any air to cut, but sometimes there won't be enough.
I got a little bit of air under the log, probably enough to go ahead and get my bar under there and finish the cut, but if it kicks back at all or pulls up into the wood or pushes down, my bar is going to be in the mud. So if I just bore in, take out the bottom, and then come up, there's some compression here. I'm not sure how much, but I should be able to pull the bar up at full rev and get it out. Let's see. There you go, that worked there. You saw it sit down and compress, but because I'm on the tension side, I can full rev and come out. If the log's too heavy though, it sometimes will still grab your bottom chain on the way out, so you don't want to use that there. Either use a wedge or compression first, tension second, and try to get your bar out of there as it opens. I'll try to demonstrate that here. So there's a little bit of air under the log here, but out on the end there, it's pressing down, so this is going to compress my bar. Now, if you're not comfortable with plunge cutting or bore cutting, I would suggest, as I do most of the time, just cutting the compression wood till it starts to pinch, popping a wedge, and then you can normally get your bar in there and get your bar out because the wedge will hold it. That's the safer technique, but if you don't have a wedge or can't be bothered, you can try this. Sometimes though, if you don't keep your saw revved and pull it out the top fast enough, it'll still get pinched. That's exactly what I mean there. It will sometimes get pinched like that. So it's not the best technique, but it is a technique.
But if you're a firewood guy, most of the time you're going to be cutting them into rollable sections, cutting down and then back barring up through. It's very simple. And if you have a tractor, by all means, pick it up so it's easy cutting. If anybody tells you that's dumb, it's just because they're jealous they don't have heavy machinery. All right, so here's an example of that clockwork technique on a very large oak log. I learned this from Bjorn Butler and Buckin Billy Ray. There's even a Vancouver safety video that shows this very clearly. You're gonna dog in and remove as much of the far side of the wood as possible. You might even have to get up on the log if it's this big to cut some of that, so that when you finish, you can finish with the tip of your bar from your side. It works well. You might still get pinched. You're going to get pinched. And when you do, the first thing you're going to go to is the wedge. So in this case, I have some air underneath where I can cut from the tension side second. So basically marrying the two, I'm using that clockwork technique. I probably should have cut more of that far side, to be honest. But I'm going to go ahead and cut down as far as I can. You can see here, I could probably ream buck and keep that open if I wanted to, but I chose to just come from the tension side and finish it off. I don't have any examples of ream bucking, but the redwood guys use it and it really helps. Well guys, that's enough, I think. I hope that was helpful to somebody. I made this video because I used to suck, not long ago in fact. And the internet has a lot of information out there, but pros, I think, sometimes forget how difficult it is for novices. So from one novice to another, signing off. Peace.